cases. I think a formal process that is contained here is beneficial, and the directors must be selected as well to fit the business of the organization. Who sits on your board becomes a crucial question. Is it just your friends and colleagues, or are they people who will bring something to the table? Are they people in competition with you who do not have an incentive to contribute to what you're doing? All these will strengthen the hands of directors in implementing the code. So conformity and compliance must be monitored at all times in order to ensure that they are actually adding something to the organization. And ultimately, every company is looking for improved performance. So if we see that streamlining of operations and ensuring that the code's provisions are properly integrated with the management practices and processes within any organization, then the chances of success become a lot higher. So on this note, I urge directors to ensure they understand the code, they imbibe its contents, they become committed to implementing it in their organizations, and allocate enough resources in order to ensure that the spirit first and finally the letter of the code compliance will be imbibed in their organizations. Thank you very much.
Benedict Moloko. And I was just about to ask the question if the Director General of the SEC will bring out a copy of the code and ask Dr. Olusegun Osunkaye to sign on right away. So Moloko suggests that there should be a copy of the code. Would you want to sign that right away on camera, live to the whole world, to sign on Nestle Nigeria PLC on the Code of Good Corporate Governance? Ladies and gentlemen, please watch this event. A round of applause, please, for Nestle Nigeria PLC being the first quoted company in Nigeria to officially sign the new code on good corporate governance. That will go into the archives. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A very important milestone in this very live event. Thank you very much, Dr. Olusegun Osunkaye, OON, Chairman, Nestle Nigeria PLC. Now, very important, Dr. Osunkaye, I'm sure you're not just on the board of Nestle Nigeria PLC. This code, that document you just signed, means that you will need to structure how you see it on the board of other companies. We want your intervention. What is your perspective of how to operate this document from the perspective of your person as a director of many companies in Nigeria and as the chairman of Nestle Nigeria PLC? You have the floor, please.
Thank you, moderator. Up front, this code is customer friendly. It has inbuilt flexibilities, and in particular, I want to refer to Part A, Paragraph 1(2)(b), that those companies seeking to raise funds from the capital market are expected to demonstrate sufficient compliance with the principles and provisions of the code, appropriate to their size, circumstances, or operating environment. That inbuilt flexibility makes it user-friendly, because one size does not fit all. I am involved in very large companies. I'm also involved in very small companies, even though they are public companies. And from experience, it will take about 2 years for the small companies to come to scratch with the provisions of the code. This has allowed in the flexibility, and I want to commend the SEC. Now, the code applies to listed public companies on the stock exchange, as well as other public companies. It will be useful to the investing public and other stakeholders, such as banks and other financial institutions, to know these other public companies. And I think the SEC is hereby requested to publish the list of all public companies quoted and unquoted. Now, companies that did private placements in the boom era of the stock exchange in 2006 to 2008 era are now, in my opinion, if they have over 50 shareholders, are now public companies. We do hear figures here and there that in that era, up to 200 or 300 companies did private placements. The SEC we know, we have the records. And now they will benefit, whether they know it or not, from complying with this code in their own affairs. And I want to say that SEC should actually encourage these erstwhile private companies to come on the stock exchange. Maybe SEC will give them some carrots, some incentives to come on the stock exchange to be quoted. It will widen the scope of the market as well as deepen the market. I heard my colleague, Ms. Moloko, saying that there are 600 companies quoted, 625 on the stock exchange. Well, I thought so. I thought it's about 225, 250 quoted. Now, if we were to add, if my figure is correct, 200 to 300 private companies, which are now public companies unknown to them, I think the stock exchange will be having about 500 quoted companies, and it will help to vitalize the stock exchange and also bring some measure of confidence. The overall tone of the code, as I've mentioned, is customer friendly. That is to say, apply suasion first before wielding the stick. That is well captured, and I congratulate the SEC for that. I think it will inspire confidence. Those who err in complying with this code is not because they deliberately want to err. It is because sometimes they don't know, or if they know, they don't know how to go about it. And therefore, they should be encouraged, first by a warning, and second warning, and then you can apply the stick. It should not be the stick first, in my opinion. Now, we were told that shareholders are to be given equal access to information about the company. That's paragraph 21.2. But we do have institutional shareholders. And in fact, institutional shareholders and shareholders with large shareholdings should seek to influence positively the standard of corporate governance. They should seek explanations whenever they observe non-compliance with the code. There is a dilemma here. If all shareholders are to have equal access to information, and we are being told that institutional shareholders, including perhaps financial analysts, can go to companies to encourage them to comply. In that process, they will have information which is not available to other shareholders or the general public. This is a dilemma, and I think it's not only in Nigeria, it's in other places. Financial analysts will make a lot of trouble with managing directors of companies. They insist on having information, they insist on having analysis. In the process, they will have access to information not usually available. How do we solve this? So that is a dilemma, but fortunately, the code is not static, it's a dynamic document. Before the next review, there will be debates and there will be symposia, I believe, that we can trash these and other points that do come to mind from time to time in exercising this code.
Bill. Is it more of the Freedom of Information Bill or what?
Freedom of Information Bill, if you were to put it that way, but available to all. Is it a question of if you ask, you get? If any other shareholder were to knock on the door of a company and say, I'm a shareholder of this company, I want all this information. Question, will he or she be entitled to that information? I have no answer.
I'm sure Mrs. Patricia Adedikwe will want to answer that. Madam, what will you do? Dr. Chike said you should influence. Could you please take the microphone? She will influence the session show. So she'll retail investors or shareholders with 1,000 units or 500 units of a company. I have just about 50 units of Wando, for example. Should I come in at the same time as Chevron, close pension, a PFA, and have the same information about what happens in Nestle Nigeria, for example?
Thank you. This is actually one of the issues I noted for my discussion, and I would say that the information should be provided on a needs basis. For example, the Chevron closed PFA belongs to PENOP, which is a group that governs the pension operators. Information which PENOP requests for, they're requesting because they believe it's of relevance to all the institutional investors in the pension industry. So I would say information should be provided on a needs basis. And with continuous engagement between PENOP, for example, and the particular company in question, you can both agree on what information should be provided and what information should be withheld.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okay. Dr. Oshukeye, I will have to bridge that very quickly, if you permit me. We would like to hear from, you want to make what's about 1 minute?
From the industry perspective, I have 1 or 2 points which I have to cover.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
The audit committee. The old code, the previous code says that, well, audit committee is a formation of a statutory committee, section 359 of KAMA, and that you have equal representatives of the directors and equal representatives of shareholders. That is statutory. Now, in that old code, it says that the chairman of the committee should be a non-executive director. Now, what we find in practice is that directors are ceding that requirement to the shareholders. So, in audit committees, most of the chairmen of audit committees are shareholders. It's a dilemma. The audit committee in Nigeria is not a committee of the board. In other jurisdictions, audit committees are committees of the board. Now, when you have audit committees in Nigeria made up of directors and shareholders, there is likely to be sensitive information which normally is shared among directors in board meetings, which will now flow to audit committees. Now, the shareholders, most of them come from shareholder associations, and they are obliged, after audit committee meetings, to report to their constituencies. If it so happens, out of the 19 or so shareholder associations we have, and they are increasing by the day, if the shareholders on a particular company come from one association, that association will have advantage which other associations do not have. That is the first dilemma that we should see. Is it that we should amend the Companies and Allied Matters Act when it comes to audit committees so that they are committees of the board? Now, the second point on audit committee is the internal audit function. Is very powerful, and it says that all companies should have an effective risk-based internal audit function. This will greatly assist the board in discharging its responsibilities of internal control, internal processes and systems, and risk management. I agree. However, I would like to draw attention to the relationship between the board and the audit committee. The board is expected to approve an audit charter through the audit committee. In other words, the audit committee becomes the de facto authority if the board has to walk through an audit committee. The internal audit unit should also, according to the code, report directly to the audit committee. And the audit unit should have unrestricted access to the chairman of the audit committee, who most probably, remember, will not be a board member, as well as the chairman of the board. Now, it should also be noted that the head of internal audit is a senior manager, hopefully, in the company. And because he's a manager in the company, he will also be reporting to the MD and CEO, who is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the company. So you now have the internal audit spread into three: MD CEO, chairman of audit committee, and the chairman of the board. But importantly, that the board, which is the primary body responsible for the